Hello, hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. Check us out at mtca.com. And today we've got Britney Coleman on the pod. For our newer listeners, these artist exploration episodes, we aim to explore the paths to success that artists have forged and are still forging, and tease out how their theatrical training helped them to blaze that trail. This was a fun episode. It was my first time meeting and chatting with Britney. Didn't stop me from putting her through the gauntlet of identity and how you discover your identity that I did with Sarah Ford. And coming up in just a few weeks, we're going to do the same with the inimitable Marcus Crawford Guy of MTCA fame before putting to bed this little runner, which I've enjoyed. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. I hope you found these conversations helpful. You know, I know they're a little intellectual and maybe they can feel a bit vague as we talk about things like self-discovery. But I just didn't want the fact that it was hard to be a reason that we shied away from it. We are in year 5 of this podcast. We can do hard things, and we're going to try to do hard things. Speaking of hard and big things, this weekend we wrapped up our private audition weekend with 6 awesome schools alongside our junior college experience. It was all a big hit. I had a blast. It was so great seeing so many of you. Thank you to the kind parents and students who came up to me and told me they were fans of the pods. It means so much to me. I had a few students come up to me like as they were walking to their auditions and say like, "You're in my headphones right now. I'm listening to you." You know, as they were like very smartly, I think, listening to part of an episode with a faculty member that they were literally about to walk into the room and then audition for that very faculty member. It was true of all 6 of these schools. And I think, you know, part of the intention of the pod is a great way to feel really comfortable, not only knowing the vibe of a school, but then knowing the vibe of a little person. You know, we always talk about like they're just people behind the table. What a great way for them to feel like a real person when they're in your ears and then you're going to go have a conversation with them. And I will say, so many parents came up to me. Thank you to the parents. It's very sweet. Many of you thanked me for the podcast as a resource in general. And it's always exciting for me as the years pass to hear about the longevity of some of you listening. One of our junior parents, right after the junior college experience meeting, said she'd been listening for 4 years already. And I was like, wait, so your child was in 7th grade, literally? So that's amazing. But it's awesome. It's one of the fun things as we talk about this podcast going into its 5th year. I guess it'll be its 6th year, technically, as we get into 2026. It's really cool to be able to see that longevity. So a big thank you to all of you out there for listening, for recommending to your friends, for rating and reviewing us when you do that. All of it really helps us stay relevant and helps me continuing to pump out this very content that so many of you want. Speaking of content, next week we are going to do a special takeaways only kind of episode. It's your favorite kind. Oops, all takeaways. I think it's essentially going to be basically a long audio blog, and it's going to kind of double with the blog that I'm writing this month. But I hope I'll be able to expand it a bit in the episode. We may do a little bit more things. We'll see. We'll see as we record that. But I'm going to try to record that before I take off for Chicago, where I'll be visiting in-laws over the break. And then we'll be back for a New Year's and beyond as we get into 2026. I'm wishing all of you the most wonderful holiday seasons. Hope you've enjoyed it so far and you continue to enjoy it. And please enjoy this episode with Britney Coleman. Well, we are so excited to be joined by Britney Coleman. Britney has a BFA and MT from the University of Michigan, which she noted was overrepresented on our podcast. We know we are representing a couple schools a little too much. We're sorry, we're doing it. She's been on Broadway in Sunset Boulevard, Tootsie Company, Beautiful, the National Tour of Beautiful, Beetlejuice Company. Also, Kelly makes me mention in a Harry Potter musical, which Kelly says is a very big deal when she was in high school. It's a very, very big deal, which I believe her. Brittany, welcome to the pod. How you doing?
Hi, Charlie. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm going to start you off with the same question that I start everybody off with, which is just, you know, I read that brief bio of like the Broadway and the National Tour credits, but like talk to me a little bit about like, I'd love to hear your journey up to, you know, let's say 16 years old, like sort of where you came from in the world, how you got into theater, like getting up to the place of when you were applying to colleges. What do we need to know about Brittany?
Yeah. So I think important context is that I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is the campus of U of M
Heck yes.
of Michigan.
Did you have a parent who
And
worked for Michigan or what? Literally on the
uh,
college campus?
so what happens when a lot of people go to Michigan is that they end up staying after they graduate. So
Yep.
that's what happened with my mom. She got her master's in social work there
Mm-hmm.
and decided to stay. And my dad is from Saginaw, Michigan. So
So cool.
yeah, they were working at
Saginaw
a facility
Pride?
together.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Okay.
So I am one of the many kids with parents who are alums as well. I think I'm actually the 3rd generation. I have a great aunt who also went there. Anyway, being on a college campus growing up just
Yep.
means we have access to a lot of amazing things in terms of the arts coming through and
Yep.
academics. Everyone is competitive and in an academic sort of way.
Uh-huh.
We take the school for granted. I think that goes across the board with any college town is like
Yep.
kids don't realize what they have access
Right.
to.
How special it is. And was
Yeah,
it for you, Michigan, or about like from 16, 15, 14, were you just like, well, that's where I want to go. My parents went there. That's where I'm going to go.
no,
No.
not necessarily.
Yeah.
Well, like Michigan was the fallback school for everyone,
Hmm.
whether they wanted to be doctors or lawyers or whatever. Like
Yep.
everybody kind of wanted to get out.
Yep.
And it took me getting into the school and having calls from professors being like, hey, we only accept a handful of people. Do you
Yep.
know how many people audition?
Yep.
Like XYZ.
This is
And I was
actually
like, oh,
pretty
wow.
special.
I
Yeah.
actually had no idea.
Yep.
But going way, way, way back, my dad is the musician side of the family.
Hmm.
He's one of 10. He's a pastor's kid. And so all of his siblings sang and
Yep.
played instruments in the church.
So
So
cool.
yeah, he was the drummer, and he also sings. He has an amazing voice
Hmm.
and a little bit of a recording career. And yeah, so that's kind of that side of the family. I was a very shy kid growing up, very intimidated,
Uh-huh.
especially by that side of the family. So
Uh-huh.
uh, thankfully, my teachers in elementary school, one in particular, when he got there, I think I was in third grade. He was our new uh, music ed teacher. His name is Jeff Willits. I always talk about him because
Hey,
he
Jeff.
was the one who literally pulled me out of the chorus and said, hey, do you know you can sing?
Uh-huh.
We're doing this 45-minute version of Secret Garden for
Yep.
children, and you should be merry. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. I was so shy. And then
Yep.
the minute he pulled me out and kind of got me into what that is in terms of theater and just taking up space on stage, I was hooked. So then I did
Yep.
every school show after that.
And did you know pretty early on, hey, you want to pursue this to the college level?
No,
No.
no, because I was also really heavy into academics and
Yeah.
stuff too, and orchestra. I play violin,
Yep.
just
I see
all
that
the
we see
instruments
for
up
those
there.
watching the video, there's many instruments on the wall behind Brittany.
Uke, mandolin,
Hmm.
guitar over there. Yeah. So it really took me having to choose um, what colleges I was applying
Yeah.
to junior
So
year to be like
what
musical
did that
theater.
college list look like? Because we determined, at least you tell me pinned the nail on the donkey in terms of your age. So you're a pretty young guest for compared to a lot of our people who've gone through this when it was a different process. I mean, you would have gone through this process, at least musical theater wise, not that dissimilar to some of our students today in terms of you would have had pre-screens, right? You would have had a couple pre-screens. No.
Oh, I was kidding about my age.
Oh, were you much older actually? No, Brittany, I believed you. I was like, oh man, I was trying to be complimentary, but I would have believed you. Are you older than that, actually?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm pre-screen days. Thank
pre-screen days. That's as much
God.
as we're gonna age Brittany on this podcast is pre-screen days. I was like, she's like 26,
Yeah.
27. I was like, okay, great. She's only a
Oh,
couple years out
no,
of
no,
school.
no, no,
I
no.
believed
No,
you.
no, no.
No,
Um, I I missed the pre-screen days, and I'm also happy to say Michigan didn't have a cut program, but at the time CCM did and a
yeah.
couple of other schools.
Oh yeah.
I
Okay.
think
So now you're aging yourself much closer to my
yeah.
own age.
So, like, I
That's
missed the cuts, I missed the
yeah.
pre-screens. I'm so
That's so funny.
happy.
I feel like
Oh.
I'm so often have a dry sense of humor, and people miss my own sarcasm or my. I'm like, no, obviously I was kidding there. That's very funny to have it
Mhm.
happen to me to see what it feels like.
Ah,
But okay, fine. So we're not going to talk about pre-screens. But talk to me. What was your journey in terms of like what were the schools you were looking at? Were you looking at only musical theater schools? Did you look at academic programs too, just academically? What was the list for Brittany?
yeah, it was, important to me to be at like a non-conservatory
Yep.
style school. But also I applied to uh colleges and MT programs that an upperclassman of mine had also applied to because I had no
Copy
idea
the
what I was
list.
doing. I was
Yeah.
doing like, you know, I was taking tap dance lessons on the side. I don't think I did maybe two musicals in high school tops. So
Yep.
like most of it is straight theater, then all the orchestra stuff. So I was like, oh, musical theater is a thing. I can just combine
Right. I like
everything.
music.
Not
I like theater.
really.
Sure.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like very naive of me. But I just went off a list. I think it was CMU, Michigan, Ithaca, NYU,
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern.
Hmm.
So, yeah, you would know more about CMU than I would, but that's also it's not a conservatory, right?
CMU is a conservatory. CMU is
Oh, it
very
is.
conservatory like, but you, for the most part, NYU, Northwestern, much more academic schools on
Yeah.
there. I mean, CMU is also that weird example where it's like such an academic school, that it feels like it shouldn't be a conservatory. It doesn't feel like it's Juilliard or whatever, but in terms of the
Yeah.
actual academics of it, it's very conservatory like. But that leads me to that question was, so at Michigan now,
Mhm.
were you a taker advantage of the double major possibility? Did you do a minor? Did you do some of the academics? Did you really feel like, hey, I sucked up some of the academics that Michigan offers beyond the musical theater?
Yeah, so that's a requirement for sure in terms of getting your degree there is just making sure that your academics are covered. I actually ended up testing out of a lot of my requirements, like my language and my math and science.
Yep.
Um, so then that left me to explore what else the university had to offer. So I took English classes and psychology and maybe a semester or two of Italian. I can't
But it was
remember.
more exploration. It wasn't like, hey,
It
I'm
really
getting a
was.
double major in psych or whatever. It wasn't like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just kind of generally across the board.
Yep. Cool. And it seemed like, and now this course now, and I'm understanding your age much better, given that you would have done this with Darren and Chris. But it seemed like also got a chance to create a musical. That was in college. You did that. Is that true?
Yeah, so they had a really strong student-run theater
Yep.
organization. We called it Basement Arts, and it was like fully like produced by students, designed, directed,
Yep.
teched, lit, all of that stuff. And luck and timing is everything, but I was there. Let's see, all these guys would have been seniors. So I think I was a sophomore. I
Mm-hmm.
was a sophomore at the time. And yeah, they had the Lang brothers, we call them. They were
Yep.
the writers of our show. They had already done a Lord of the Rings parody
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to do a Harry Potter parody and it got me
It,
swept up in that. And
it
I
was from
auditioned
the
for it.
YouTube of it all. How did it become so
Yeah.
popular? Was it YouTube at the time that made it a huge
So
national thing?
So a very well, it was called Harry Potter the musical at the time,
Uh huh.
and then the lore is that we got a cease and desist from Warner Brothers once
Uh
it
huh.
became popular on YouTube. But our recording of it, we recorded it because we couldn't fit our family and friends into the shows. We added
Yep.
performances. It was in our little, our one of our classroom spaces that turns
Yep.
into, you pull out the risers and like, ta-da! It's a theater. It's a black box theater. We just couldn't. We didn't have the space for everyone to see it
Yep.
that wanted to see it. So we filmed it and we put it up on YouTube. And I think it's one of the first like live filmed
Uh huh.
theatrical shows that went viral
Yep.
on YouTube.
It's
Yeah, it
so
kind of
cool.
went insane.
And kind of unique, I feel like, for Michigan in the like, it seems like that model, and again, Michigan is kind of a unique school in the like the amount of academics you take while still having what could feel like conservatory level classes from a musical theater perspective. Because I
Yeah.
would say that's not unique to have like the student run theaters. If you're at Vassar or you're at Northwestern, you're at those kind of places where there's not the intensive musical theater training. But it's cool to kind of, that you get a little of both, but there really is still like CMU does not have that. We had like there's a scotch and soda, but it's for like non-majors. None of the musical theater people are like
Uh-huh.
doing the like, fun student run groups because we're like in the musicals
Yeah.
and in the plays at the conservatory.
That's so
It's so
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, the best part about our student thing was that it wasn't just MTs. It was like actually mostly straight theater
Uh huh.
folks. So they're bringing in their own perspective on it, their true fearlessness. Because I feel like MTs, and I don't know if it's the same nowadays, but especially when I was at school, like we're a little tightly wound
Mm-hmm.
in terms of respect for the craft. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but like when straight theater majors sing, there's like a sense of abandonment, and
Yes.
it's so fun.
Yes.
I wish that translated more into like our kind of Broadway sphere.
Oh, that's
Um,
such a good way to put it. I do feel
yeah.
like with our students today, both the actors and the MTs
Hmm.
could use a little more of that fearlessness. I feel like that was so common in, I'm going to say our era now because we're close enough in age. I'm discovering that like there was especially, it would be especially the non-MT actors. The MTs definitely more concerned with beauty, but there was an abandon of like, it was almost like a pride in like, I'm okay if it's a little ugly. I'm okay if it's messy. The
Yes.
messiness is almost the point of it. Like that.
Yep.
I feel like that's hard now for this generation acting and musical theater because of Instagram, because of TikTok, because you could have done the Harry Potter musical not knowing that YouTube was going to make it into a hit. But I do think
Yeah.
there's a conscientiousness now of like, if this is being filmed, this could go viral. And so it's that much harder to be messy and to be open and
Yep.
vulnerable, all those things.
Exactly. So the timing of it was incredible.
Yeah.
It was so dumb. It was so low budget. It was so great.
Yeah.
And then we did it like a sequel the next year, and we could tell like, oh, okay, we upped our budget for the set so that it
Mm-hmm.
looks good on camera. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we've got a costume budget now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, Kelly will be proud of us. We talked about the Mary Potter musical, which is what she wanted. Talk to me a little bit about post college. So, how is the
Yeah.
graduation into showcase, into those first couple years navigating? Did you move right to New York? How was that experience of now your journey to success and all the things that you're doing now?
Yeah. So let's see. We showcased, which was great and a very important step, I think, in entering kind of the whole New York market.
Yeah.
And
Did you get
also
an
just,
agent right out of showcase?
I did.
Yep.
I did. Yeah.
Amazing.
Um, I sang Fame.
Heck yes.
It was a great setup. We had all the dancers do, 30 seconds of like heavy lifts and like tourgetés and like explosive dancing. And then I just
Hmm.
got to walk out and it was a park and
Just
park
saying.
and they lifted me up. And it was like very tongue in cheek. And I think
Hmm.
that's why it kind of made it successful in kind of that same kind of Star Kid way of like,
Yep.
I'm here, but are we taking this seriously? I
Right.
don't know. You tell me.
Yeah.
So that was fun. So that I've actually been with the same agents ever since.
That's
I don't want
amazing.
to. I can say the do it. Can I say the amount of time? I actually don't even know how long it's been at
No,
this
and
point.
nor do you ever need to. You can play 25 to 45, and you should enjoy that for as long as you can, whatever wider the range is. I feel like
Yeah.
as I get older, the range gets wider.
Exactly. Range. We love range.
We love a range.
Yeah. So
And so then, what was that first big hit for you? How soon after school was that where you're going? Now I'm hitting that. Whether it's the first big tour, or the first big Broadway thing, or the first thing where you go, "Hey, I feel like I'm on the map."
Yeah, well, first I had to get my union card. So
Yep.
I was doing summer stocks the 2 summers previous to graduating at a wonderful theater in Indiana called Wagon Wheel Theater.
Hmm.
It's in the round. And they do like a handful of guest artist contracts, but like most of us are non-union, and it
Yep.
is truly like we rehearse for a week, we open the show. The
Yep.
next day we start rehearsals for the next show, and it was a wonderful training ground in
Hmm.
terms of stamina. For us. So that was intense. So I showcased and then went right to Indiana to do that season.
Hmm.
And then I came back and yeah, pretty much hit the ground running for auditions and everything. I did one non-union show at the old St. Anne's warehouse
Yep.
before they
Was enough.
tore it down and moved it across the street.
Hmm.
And that was cool. I'm still friends with a lot of those girls. It was a Karen O show, Karen O of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and Adam
Uh-huh.
Rapp, who's Anthony Rapp's brother, wrote it. Adam is an incredible
Yep.
playwright.
Of
He
course.
directed it. It was the strangest fever dream of a show.
Hmm.
They ended up taking it to Australia afterwards, and then I could not go because I was getting my equity card doing Into the Woods. Um, that was at Baltimore Center Stage
Hmm.
and Westport Country Playhouse.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's
that was a
pretty, I mean,
co-pro.
you're describing it as a pretty typical, I mean, in some ways, not always actually typical, but a sort of standard. Like I did the non-union show and then I did the regional gig. It wasn't like, hey, I graduated in Broadway a year later. It seems like, but you're building up, you're getting your equity card, you're working regionally. How many years before we're going to hit the first Broadway show?
Mm, took me maybe 4 years to do Broadway.
Yeah. I mean, it's both
Yeah.
both very quick in the long run thing. Amazing. That's your 26 and you're doing your a Broadway show, but also awesome in terms of like the build up to it, in terms of that isn't also a long time in some ways, 4 years to be building
Yeah.
and doing regional work, and it's both, right? It's
It was
a
a
little bit of
lot
both.
of yeah, it was a lot of regional gigs, which were great because it's all I was doing all like principal stuff.
Yep.
I'm not a dancer, so that limits me in terms
Right.
of
Right. You're not jumping right into
kind
an
of the
ensemble in the
ensemble,
same way.
yeah,
Yeah.
ensemble work that I can do. So it was all like principal stuff, which was great, and
Yeah.
met a lot of people who then I ended up circling back on Broadway too.
Yeah.
It's really interesting kind of looking back
Yeah.
on like, wow, okay, so that's where those people were in their lives when they were
Uh-huh.
working that regional gig. I see. Okay,
Uh-huh.
interesting. Connecting all those dots.
Uh-huh. That's so cool.
Um,
Do you remember
yeah.
any favorite audition stories, whether good or bad, in terms of those early years? Were there any like, oh my God, amazing, here I booked this, or God, I blew this audition?
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember right after Showcase, as I was meeting with agents, they also called me in to come in for Sister Act. There it is. That's where we can really land the date.
Oh yeah.
They were casting maybe covers.
Hmm.
And I just remember like having my like backup showcase clothes in there with me and like having the sides of my hands literally shaking
Mhm.
as I'm trying to sing that song. Oh, it was
Mhm.
awful. It was
Mhm.
awful.
Yeah.
But like I knew I was just like, okay, this is where I'm at mentally in this place right now. Like we're okay.
Yeah. It's
We're okay. Keep on trucking along.
I think helpful for people to hear, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the second half. We talk about sort of identity and self-discovery and kind of the journey of who
Mhm,
you are. Of like just
mhm,
to hear that like somebody who is capable of being the leading a national tour of company or whatever. Someone. I mean, that is not a small lift of what you're capable of doing, but still
mhm.
knowing like even someone like with that who ultimately has that ability that your body can betray you in that way. I think sometimes people when they have that experience, they go, "Well, I guess I'm not cut out for it. I guess if I was really
Mhm.
an actor, I'd be stepping up in this moment, or my body wouldn't be betraying me in that way." But it's like we all have those experiences. We all have a moment where you go, "Man, I botched that one. Man, that was not for whatever reason. I wasn't in a place to have that good audition." But then obviously you're going to have some great ones coming up. Imagining you did not book the sister act while shaking like a leaf.
Oh, absolutely not.
Mm,
No. Because I think
yeah.
they also kind of squeezed me into callbacks too. So it was like I was dancing with just like a handful of girls.
Uh huh.
And like you can prepare as much as you can for, that kind of situation, especially through school, through class, through coaching.
Yep.
But you'll always have your first experience. And that was my very first audition for Broadway. So,
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely a different level of nerves. It just feels when
yeah,
you know it's real in that way, it's a different level. I mean, we talk about with the first college edition too. It's like the first time it's real, it's just a little more nerve wracking than even if you prepared for it,
exactly.
even if you know it's coming, the
Hmm.
stakes are there. Do you remember the first one, great one, the one where you booked one? Was it? I'm not. Is that Sunset Boulevard first? I'm not sure in terms of the order of it all.
Yeah. So, funny enough, I had done the tour of Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
uh I can't remember if like that audition overlapped with tour. If I think it happened right after. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, same producers of Beautiful, the Carole King musical, and
Yep.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yep.
So I remember walking into my final callback for Sunset and seeing familiar faces behind the table, and that made me relax immediately. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, wait, we're
Cool.
actually gonna have fun here.
I've
That's
already been
nice.
cast by these people. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So that was like a nice kind of like wind in my sails,
Yep.
like everything's probably going to be okay and just have fun with it in the room kind of
Yep.
thing.
And then
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about the company experience. We mentioned that you did it with Lisi, who's one of our coaches, also a podcast guest. She was on as well doing the tour. I mean,
Yeah.
what a role that is. I mean, that's for forever. My wife's talked about like that would be the dream to play Bobby. It's just like what that experience is.
Ah.
So, what was the experience of now actually playing it? I mean, how was it?
It was just crazy. It was so interesting because I had done the Broadway production too. So I
Yeah.
saw
And were you covering that, or you were
I
actually playing Bobby on
was.
Broadway? Yeah, yeah.
So I really kind of saw
You're
that
sitting
role
in.
through kind of Katrina's lens
Mm-hmm.
first, and just seeing how that show got put together.
Yep.
And yeah, I was like watching everyone like a hawk during that process because it wasn't easy. It's a hard show to do.
Harsh show. Yep.
It's a beloved show and people have a lot of opinions about
Uh huh.
it.
Uh huh.
And so I first caught on to that in New York and I was like,
Yep.
this is interesting, and it's
Yep.
really interesting to watch people um adjust their way through it. But like
Mm-hmm.
ultimately it was a wonderful kind of production to be a part of, but also just watch
Mm-hmm.
from start to finish. And
Mm-hmm.
so I took a lot of that with me into tour,
Yep.
which like is great, but also probably a fresh perspective would have been helpful too,
Mm-hmm.
I think, with that
Yeah,
process.
how
Because
do you make that journey from having studied somebody who obviously is not identical to you in a lot of
right.
ways? Like, how
Mhm.
do you then make Bobby your own? How do you then go, okay, well, this is my Bobby. Now, as I'm taking it over, it's a little different maybe when you're stepping in and playing the role within a production that's already established. But
Right.
now when you're like, I'm going out and I'm on the tour and this is my Bobby, like, were there things you did to actively differentiate or to actively reshake the etch a sketch so that you can go, okay, we're keeping what worked, but also here's what I want to do.
Yeah, for sure. I think what I learned is that like Bobby can fall pretty flat just in general if you're not bringing your whole self as an actor and as a person, as a whole human being to that role. Um, and so where I had the most fun and what I thought was the most interesting was when I could just let kind of my essence shine, which was like youthful and goofy in a lot of certain ways, which was really fun. And I think it was the best way for me to be able to connect with folks on stage and to connect with, the actors who were directed to very much just interrupt my whole life and just be
Mhm.
in my space. Um, yeah, it was interesting. It was hard. It was a hard show to do. It was, I think, a very ambitious show to tour across the
Yep.
country in the way that it did. I think a lot of people do know the show, but a lot of people don't know the show.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So then when they see ads full of these like bright, like glossy balloons, and like I'm sitting there with a big old smile on my face,
Yep.
they think one thing when they see that poster,
That's
and then
interesting.
literally the first scene, I walk out, it's gray, it's dark, and
Yep.
I pour myself a glass of bourbon. That's how we start the show.
Yep.
So it's like, it was a hard show to market. It was a hard show to
It's so
describe.
interesting.
So
I,
many
I
interviews
would
with
have seen
TV,
much
like,
more of the other version. I would have seen the frustration and the difficulty of everybody knows the show, like a Hamlet or whatever, where you're sitting there going like, man, I know what Hamlet is. I know what Bobby is. I have my own opinions that you're fighting it. I didn't even think about people who wouldn't know the show at all, who would go, well, this is a fun, upbeat Sondheim show. And you're like, kind of, but also really not. Like, yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah,
this woman is having a lot of like existential crises,
yeah,
and and also just talking about the relevancy of marriage
yeah,
in 2024, 25.
yeah,
That's also kind of not necessarily a moot conversation, but it's not really in the forefront of a lot of people's minds as far as
yeah,
like the stakes of being married or not. The
yeah,
culture is just, it's different.
yeah,
So a
in so
lot of
many ways.
people were like, I would say, like the general populace of the nation was kind of like, huh,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
When's Wicked coming?
I mean, that does seem to be true of like so many Sondheim shows, actually, both in
Yeah.
terms of the touring, but also just in terms of the New York productions of them. That they don't, even though they're the most beloved in some ways by musical theater aficionados,
Hmm.
by the general public, they don't always sell as well. They don't always, even though you're like these are the best shows in some ways that we make.
Really?
They don't
I
have the
know.
same hit. Yeah, they don't not like Wicked. They're not going to hit like Wicked in the same way.
No.
Yeah,
No, because you have to think. You have to think with a Sondheim show.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people maybe aren't in the headspace to do that,
yeah,
to be honest.
yeah, yeah.
And where we're at right now, a
Yeah,
lot
am
of
I
people
am
just
I
want to
paying
see
three
really
hundred
fast.
dollars on
It's,
Broadway to sit down and think, or do I want to just be wowed and let go of my problems for a little while? Yeah.
yeah, the big cities loved it. We
Uh
had a
huh.
great time in the larger cities, but then we were in a lot of other smaller towns for a week at a time, and I thought that was a strong choice for them to
Yeah.
schedule it that way.
Interesting. All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's take a short break because we're burgeoning on the discussion that I want to dive into about self discovery and identity and all these things. So we'll take a short break and then we'll dive a little deeper into that in a flash. Okay, we are back with Brittany Coleman, and we've been threatening this conversation. And by luck or by good fortune or bad fortune, you're the second person I'm taking through this particular gauntlet, which is really just about where, from a podcast perspective, it's one of the goals and missions that I have, that I've sort of been setting out for this calendar year, is to like make sure that we uncover and dive deep into some of these buzzwords. And one of the big buzzwords that so many people talk about in the college process is like, hey, it's so much about being your authentic self. That's certainly something that MTCA has said for forever. The idea is your job is to be your authentic self. But I think a lot of people are like, well, what does that mean? What do we mean when you're like, be you? We want to meet you. It's like, who is you or who is me if I'm me doing this? So we can kind of take this in any direction we want to go, and that is interesting to you. We can take this into the industry if you want to talk about, now where you are branding and marketing yourself. But I'd love to at least start at the core of like, that 16, 17-year-old self or younger, as you're sort of on that self-discovery process as a human, as an artist, if you were going through this process and you're like, okay, this is who I am. Here's how I think I want to lead in the room. These are the labels that I would put on myself. We've talked about before, like, it could be I'm a Miami Heat fan. It could be I'm a tomboy. I'm a classic music lover, whatever those things that go, this is stuff that really leads for me. I want to hear first, I guess, if like what they are for you, but then also like how did you come to those? So if you're like, I am these 5 things, this is how I lead in the world. What made you decide those are the ways that you lead in the world? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely ties into just identity in general. I have always approached, I guess, my life, but career as kind of very malleable. I
Mm-hmm.
am mixed. I'm biracial. So I've always kind of floated in between categories. I've always kind of been truly the other box.
Yeah.
Back in the days where they didn't have biracial as a category you could choose, I always had to choose other.
Wow.
Uh, so, uh, there's that element as far as looking at kind of like an equal opportunity to every role that is
Mm-hmm.
available in any way, shape, or form, but also just I'm classically trained, so I just gravitate towards things that maybe come easily to me, but also bring
When you
me
say
joy.
classic train, you mean as a vocalist or do you mean as a
Hmm.
musician? Yeah,
Uh, oh, I guess both.
both. I mean, you both play violin, but also you mean classically trained vocalist. Yeah.
Yes, vocally.
Mm-hmm.
So that in terms of like voice type, that's a thing
Right.
too. Um, Most of my career, and it still happens today, people will look at me and assume like, "Oh, you're gonna go into Lion King tomorrow, right?" And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
"No,
No, that's not what I sound like. Yeah, yeah.
no, it's not. It's not. That's not me. That's not who I am. It would not be truly like authentic to myself and like what I bring to the table."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
W-
I think
What about like because I love where you're going with this, which I think,
yeah,
in some ways you're talking about some of the more like finite identities
yeah,
that certainly we live in the world, in the political world, and we live within the theater world, and especially the musical theater world, when we talk about like
hmm,
gender and race
yeah,
and vocal type, which I want to get to too. I
hmm,
wonder, because the cool thing about the college process, to the point of those actors who you're doing Very Potter with, like you get to have some pretty gooey versions of that too, in terms
hmm,
of like, I'm a silly, goofy guy. I'm a clownish. I do that really
yeah.
well, or I'm really like. Is that something I guess at the time, or now is that something that you go? You don't have to be silly, but whatever it is. Like, do you lead with those kind of things where you're like, hey, this is a part of my identity that's not so finite and not so categorizable in terms of like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know if I necessarily like lead with anything because I feel like so much is kind of uh not given like presented to me and I
Yeah.
go, hmm, can I make
You mean
that
like from
work?
a casting
I don't know.
perspective, like, hey, can you
Yeah.
can you play this? Can you do this? Yeah, yeah,
Right. And sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I can put my own touch on it or
yeah.
no.
The
That's
reason I
not
ask it that
me.
way is like because I think I'm
Yeah.
interested in the intersection of those two things, especially
Yeah.
I think about it for our students. There is obviously in the outside world, and we've talked about this a lot, in early years in the podcast of like you want to talk about type and the ways that we talk about brand and the way the world will cast you, and I think that is a conversation, especially for some of our older listeners, for the ones who are 23 and 25 and who are
Yeah.
in the industry and wrestling with how the world is going to see them. The beautiful thing about the college process is you aren't cast as a role. You can be anything. They go, we're
Hmm.
looking for you. What are you? And you tell me. But I think even then, there's still some intersection of those gooey things of like, I am a warm, empathetic, nurturing person or whatever, like things that you
Right.
might say about yourself as a
Hmm.
human. And then also like, what does my voice sound like? To your point of going, you can take away casting from it. If you go, Lion King doesn't sound good in my voice or whatever. There are some physical limitations and some, especially in the musical theater word, vocal limitations of like how those two mash up. And I guess, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have lived at that intersection, certainly in terms of like being a biracial person, but like did you find on your college journey or on your early career journey that like any places where those were things were like pushing against each other where you're like, hey, I think I see myself doing this, either the world doesn't see me that way or that's a struggle for me, or like were there any places where you felt like as I'm trying to figure out who I am, I'm not sure how I'm butting up against this?
Yeah, I think so. Um, let's see. I'm definitely a student coming in on the early wake of Audra's success
Uh-huh.
too. So I had a really clear example of someone who sings in a very particular way
Mm-hmm.
and is also a bit of a chameleon too because she's an incredible actress.
Uh-huh.
I think
But you felt some
the
expectations of, oh, okay, you're not going to scat, so then you must be Audra or something. You're going to do this for me.
yeah, a little bit. When I think of her, it's really interesting watching how her career developed and blossomed.
Mm-hmm.
And at least on the outside looking in, she just presented herself with her 2 feet just planted. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just like so firm, so strong, with such conviction. I think the phrase that comes to mind is just joy. Like
Yeah.
she her meter is guided by what what makes her happy. And I think mine is very similar too. Like if singing a particular style of music or just playing a particular type of character makes me happy, great. What other types of songs can I do that are similar to that? What other types of
Yeah.
characters also kind of fit into that mold? And I feel like I've tried to do a lot of research to expand those to expand on those like particular events that have made me happy.
Yeah. What about like outside of the acting world? Like,
Yeah.
if you were filling out a dating profile, or if you're meeting somebody, or you should take, hey, this is who I am. Like, do you think about like outside of the ways in the world which the world would cast you? Like, how do you now at, I'm going to say 27, even though we know it's not true anymore. But now at 27, how do you lead into the world of like I am? Like, what are the labels you would put on yourself of like labels? I don't mean in like a negative way. I mean like what are the bullet points of I am A, B, and C? If you had to fill out one of those bios or Instagram things where it's I'm these 4 or 5 things. Like, what are the things that really sort of are the identity drivers for you now?
Oh gosh. Oh, I don't even know. Maybe like uh, I like to lead with like goofy. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not afraid to like be able to just be comfortable in my awkwardness. Does
Uh
that
huh.
make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Um
Yep.
yeah, total nerd. Uh
And like, what are you a nerd about? Like, if you were like, I'm a nerd about what?
what-
Everything? You're like Lord of the Rings,
Really
Harry
just
Potter, doesn't matter.
like
Yeah.
all well, yeah, truly like the fandom that branches off of Harry Potter for
Uh huh.
sure. Any of
Uh huh.
that, Legos, video games, tiny
Yep.
crafts, um, or even like certain musicians like Chris Thiele on the mandolin. Like I love going down that rabbit
Uh
hole.
huh.
Or
Yeah. Is that still something you still lead with? Like, I'm a classical musician. Like, is that? I mean, obviously it's on your wall, so in some ways you're representing that up there. But like, is that someone who meeting you would be like, oh, that's something that's really a big part of Britney?
yeah, I think so for
Yeah.
sure.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't mean to make you sit down and do a monologue consult with us. I realize I'm doing some of the, but I guess I'm bringing it up because it's like this is something our students so often for the first time are doing in this process of like they
Mm,
only know themselves as like a student. I'm a good student, or I'm a good
mm.
son, or I'm a good, maybe I'm a
Oh,
star athlete if that happens to be true. But I feel like so many, for some of our students, they have a really strong sense of that is me. And at least for now, that's what I'm leading with. But I think so many really don't in this process. They, other than
yeah,
what's hard is like a big part of their identity would be I'm an actor. I'm a musical theater person. I love to sing, dance, and act. And in this process, they sort of, the schools often ask them to be like, tell me about yourself as a person outside of yourself as an actor, and they're like, that's it, I'm an actor, this is my identity. And sort of just figuring out like how do you now in the world, other than the way the business makes you do that, how do you identify that? Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
for
like
sure.
I think about it with like when you become a parent. I have a 4-year-old, so like
Mhm.
there's such a like it is for the first time, at least for me in my life, of adult life, of like you have this huge new identity that you have to make room for. And some actors do that with like activist. They're like, okay, this is going to be a big part of me. Or sometimes
Right.
it's literally another hyphen, like I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to be that's going to be a big part of my career and identity and shifted. But I guess I'm wondering of like how has that shifted for you in terms of the way you think about those conversations from high school when you're looking at colleges to in college and you're sort of trying out those identities, and then now like how does it shift in terms of the way you think about those kind of labels or those kind of identities?
Yeah, I actually think I was much more probably like open open-minded and
Mm-hmm.
very much more out in the world like in high school when I was
Uh-huh.
doing all those other things. And then in college when I was still had to do all of my non-MT stuff. And then since coming to New York, so much of it has just been around whatever show I'm working on.
Right.
But I think it is really important to have a life outside of work, honestly,
Yep.
because those are the people that like when I'm in a cast, those are the people that I gravitate towards of
Yeah.
like, can we not talk about
Yes.
like the next number coming up? Like, how are your kids? I'm wedding planning right now, so
Hey,
that's
yeah.
my whole personality.
Wait, are you planning for your wedding or are you a wedding
For my
planner?
own wedding. Yeah.
Oh, congratulations, Brittany. Well, yeah, it's a
Thanks.
huge part of you're about to add a new label. You're gonna have to add wife. That's a huge, yeah, it's
Yeah,
a huge label. Yeah.
it's a whole thing, and I didn't
Yep.
realize how much of a rabbit hole it is until I started planning, like, started everything 2 months ago or so,
Yep.
and that's fully consumed me.
Yep. I think both with weddings and
Yeah.
parenthood, it ends up being the thing that then everyone asks you about. Everyone, you're like, I guess that's all I talk about is planning my wedding, and that's happening. I
Yeah.
guess all I talk about is bride stuff, and then it's like early childhood stuff, and whatever the thing is, you're like, this is what it
Yeah.
subsumes a big part of your identity. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes in waves. But I
And I
really
do think in
admire,
this
like,
industry, it
yeah.
really, to your point, it's very normal that it does suck up
Mhm.
the how my next job, and how's the world seeing me, and how's as I'm aging into a certain brand, how does that change me? Like I feel
Yeah.
like the industry does that to us in a way that to some extent other jobs can do that too, but not in the same way. I just feel like wait is a very difficult thing. Sorry, I cut you off. You were saying something.
No, it's all good. I mean, I think I was just gonna say, like, I admire the folks who are taking their skill set and translating it into something that's similar and adjacent, but not exactly it. So, like, my
Yeah,
friends that are taking a lot of time to record their albums, or,
yeah,
I realize, like, a lot of my Broadway stuff, I've been a cover. So it's double duty. Like, I
yeah,
haven't had time to have a life because I've been making sure that I know 4 tracks in company.
yeah. As soon as you open, you're immediately like, okay, now I'm in rehearsal for this, and then I'm doing that. It's just
Yeah.
never ending. Yeah, yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
think about it, I'm like, God, how did I even teach? How
Yeah.
did I teach on top of all that? So, like,
How did
that's
you? Yeah,
all that other extra stuff.
yeah,
I make it happen. And
yeah,
that's kind of what you have to do in the business. You make it happen. We're
yeah.
resilient in a
There's
way.
a real work ethic you need. And do you
Yeah.
have, 5-year, 10-year goals? And, are you sort of letting the wind take you in terms of where the next journeys of your career are? Or you're like, hey, I know 10 years from now, I want X.
Yeah. I found touring to be truly exhausting. I've toured 3 times now, and each one has
Hmm.
gone down in tiers, if that makes sense. Like,
Hmm.
from production
You mean
to then,
TIER, not
yes,
TEAR. Okay. I
yes,
was
yes, yes,
like, my gosh,
or
okay.
both.
They all ended in tears. I was like, okay.
Yes, no, the levels of the
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Um,
Meaning you're making less money doing it.
less everything,
Less
less
everything. Yeah.
everything. Production contracts for touring have, like, really
Right. This
disappeared
isn't a
since
you thing. This is the world thing.
this is in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even especially like Bobby and company, and then even Barbara and Beetlejuice, like, we're still at the top, but man, it's still CETA tours don't really come
Yeah.
close to production.
Yeah.
So in that way, knowing both sides of those coins, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
So now that I'm off of tour, that my main goal is to not tour.
Hmm.
To take a break, because 2 years in
That's
a
one of the
row,
easiest
back to
goals.
back,
You just don't audition for
whoo-wee.
tours. You can always not tour, but then is the goal like, hey, I really want to stay in New York and do Broadway stuff? Is it, hey, I'm looking at TV and film? Am I looking at? Are you trying to record that thing? You're allowed to also take a second and get married too. I'm not telling you need to be doing
Yeah.
acting all the time, but
Yeah, no, this has been my straight theater TV year, which has been great,
uh-huh.
and it's been a huge year, but it's also, yeah, I guess it's felt quiet in comparison.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, time wise, if you're
Yeah.
filming a TV thing every once in a while, it's like way less than doing 8 shows a week, and especially if you're covering in terms of the
Yeah.
pace of it all.
Yeah, and it's just a different skill sets, a different time commitment.
Yep.
It's just totally
Yep.
different. And when I was in school, they did not teach us this.
Hmm.
It was not as much of a thing, and I think schools have gotten so much better at incorporating all of
This
them.
being like covering, you mean, or like life business skills?
Uh TV film,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
also, yeah, I mean, we had maybe a weekend's worth of performances in college
Yep.
shows. How do you really give someone time to learn how to cover?
Yep.
And is that worth
Yeah.
their education? You know what I mean?
Totally.
So that's also a whole other thing you have to learn when you're on your feet, which
Yeah.
is
More schools
crazy.
now are doing like covering classes, which I think is, still pretty new of like, but like what that is of like, they'll teach you the
Mm,
techniques of what it is to be a swing, what it is to, how do you learn this, which I think fascinating, interesting, but in production, of course, there's no way in a weekend to realistically be like, great, everybody's going on and everybody's switching things. I mean, I don't know, maybe you could come up with it, but that doesn't seem to be where we're going.
it would be hard to do out of context.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. For sure.
Let's move toward wrapping. I'd love to just do, any general advice that you have. You mentioned something also that you teach in terms of, when you're looking at, especially this age, let's say 17 to 25, if we're looking at that range of, young artists who are looking at pursuing this in a real way. What advice do we have from a Britney Coleman? If I want to be you, or if I want to have a career like you, what would my advice be?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is kind of in this self-discovery bubble that we're talking about. My biggest thing is to just bring you to the table. That's what casting, that's what directors, that's what anybody on the hiring end of this industry wants to see, is like what what makes you you, what makes you different, what's your essence. um well, I think one of the best things I was taught in, I think, maybe freshman year of college was, you can't move forward if you're looking sideways.
Mm-hmm.
And I always, especially even as a cover, like, I do not want to see an impression of someone else's performance. That is
Totally.
not interesting to me. It doesn't feel authentic. It gives me heart palpitations because I get nervous for them.
Mm-hmm.
I get nervous for myself if I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doing this weird like ism that so and so did and it's not landing. Well, obviously because it's not my ism.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
and
course.
and very much not important to the work that needs to be done on stage. You're there to tell a story. When you're up there singing a song, you're up there to tell your story, and it's always infinitely more interesting having your own, like, take on it. If
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Can you think of an example of like you bringing what bringing you to the table looks like? Because that's one of those burrow downs where I'm like, it's advice people have heard, and of course, like co-sponsored, underlined, agree with the idea of bringing you to the table in
Hmm.
terms of like what that literally means. I think to a 17-year-old, because they're always translating these notes to go, so did you mean louder? And it's like, no, it's
Mm.
not. I said more, stay higher stakes. I didn't say louder, but like, it's like, do you mean you have to color your hair? Do you mean we need to paint our fingernails? Do we need, like, what is a way in which you go, I brought some youisms, some meisms, or you brought
Hmm.
some you to the table that would be like a successful Britney way? Again, this is not doesn't have to be the definitive way that they should all be bringing themselves to the table, but how do you find, hey, this is what it looks like for me to bring me to the table?
Yeah, and it is hard to define, isn't it? Um, for me, a lot of it is just how I interpret the material. Um, I think if I find something ironic or
Hmm.
something funny in a line in a passage, like, I can communicate that in the
Uh-huh.
line, if that makes sense.
Totally. You're bringing your own point of view, and you don't feel like
Yeah.
you're held back by, this is how Kristen Chenoweth did it, or this is how whatever. You're like, this is Britney's version of it. I'm really
Hmm.
gonna embrace that and not try to match whatever someone else brought. Cool. I love
Yeah,
it.
for sure. And even like stylistically too. Like, if you've heard someone like fully straight tone rock belt that note, or
Yep.
and you have more of a spin to your voice, like, don't fight that.
Yep.
Don't fight
Uh,
it. You
yep.
know, if it's a stylistic thing, like, you can talk to your team about it or whatever, your
Right.
MD.
So,
But
always, then you have to add in like the artistic taste version of it, of like, find your own choice, but is it a good choice? And if it's a
exactly.
radical choice, then it could be great, or it could be like, this is a terrible choice. That's always a tough
Right. Right.
tough thing to
Right.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think point of view is always the the easiest to translate. Like, how do
Yeah.
you as a person feel about this way? How does your character feel about it? Can you
Yep.
marry the two? And then can you communicate that in performance?
Well, if we're ending with marrying, then we're doing the right thing for Brittany, who, congratulations, we're so excited for you.
Thank you.
Brittany, thank you so much for the time today. It was so fun getting to chat with you.
Of course. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yes, yes, yes. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brittany. I mean, I did feel a little bit bad going in, like, with a relative stranger going into that extent. I know that was not easy. She's like, man, I just thought I was signing up for an interview. And I'm like, we're gonna go deep on identity. But you gotta do what you gotta do. Gotta serve it up for the people, give the people what they want. I, like, at one point literally noticed, I think I commented on it, that I was doing like an artistic consult. I called it a monologue consult, but it's like one of the consults you do with a song, or monologues with MTCA. I watched her start to sweat in some of the same ways our students do when we're asked these harder questions of like how you want to identify and how you really see yourself in the world. And I do think it's a really good example. There's so many ways this is true, but how much harder this process is. Again, I think in a really beautiful, I think it's a beautiful process when you talk about the college process, but how much harder it is than anything else you're going to do in your professional career. And the way you could tell Brittany was like, I haven't had to do this in a while. I haven't had to think like this in a while. Like the same would be true of a lot of things in this process. I mean, if you asked a professional actor to do a monologue, other than occasionally, like a Shakespearean actor probably has a speech that they know and might have done a speech for a Shakespeare season if they're auditioning for multiple plays, but it's really pretty rare that you're going to do a monologue in your career. It's mostly about sides. So most professional actors, that's a 30-year-old actor, they would not be nearly as strong as a 17-year-old or a college student in like pulling out a monologue that they've deeply worked on or any of those things. And the same is really true with all these questions of identity, right? We really ask you all at this age to like wrestle with these questions and like pick these paths in your life. And then you may or may not be forced to do it ever again in your career. You might. Some people really go through these crises of identity or really choose to do this deep introspection. And many adults really don't after 17, 18, 20, whatever that age is. It's really tricky because we are asking you to be engaged with this question of who you are, but especially at this age, we really don't need you to have it like ready to go with a shellacked answer, right? We don't want you to be like, I am exactly this. I am these three things. This is my dating profile, right? Just like with your prepared artistic material, you want to be incredibly prepared, but you want to be prepared and flexible, not rigid, right? You don't want to say, this is my monologue. It's going to go exactly like this. You still want to feel alive in the asking and the answering of the question of who you are, and then like continually discovering and curious, right? It's really cool if it feels like the way you're answering the question is like, right now on Saturday at 17 years old, I think I am this, as opposed to like, I know I'm this, I've always been this, and I'll always be this, right? We want somebody who knows who they are, but really want someone who like has a sense of what is authentically true about them more than like, I know all of the answers about me. And what's also tricky about this, I'm making it sound like you're going to be explicitly asked this question. You will rarely be asked this question directly. I mean, it could happen. They're like, hey, tell me about yourself, right? But rarely are they going to say, Charlie, who are you? Right? The way that we might do this directly at an MTCA interview. All of these aspects of your audition, it's that they're implicitly asking you this question. Not they're actually literally asking it, but they're implicitly doing it, whether it's in questions of material, what have you chosen to bring in for me is a version of telling me who you are, or in how you answer almost every interview question is a version of who are you, right? When they say, hey, why do you want to go to Carnegie Mellon? Why do you think you're a good fit for Carnegie Mellon? So much of that is like, who are you? Who are you that would be a good fit for Carnegie Mellon? Both do you know something about our school and also tell me something about yourself and how you think you might fit, right? It's this question again and again in so many different forms, but almost always implicitly. The reason that I think it's helpful to explicitly answer the question for yourself is that I do think it's helpful for all of that information to be springing from this informed and thoughtful place, as opposed to feeling like, well, now I answer this way, now I answer this way, and that there's not like a cohesive truth behind it. Okay, that was one long part. We're going to do a couple quick hitters. We'll see how fast we can do it. And then I have one more longer thing I want to talk about. I just wanted to note at the very beginning of the interview, I mentioned this idea of school overrepresentation, right? This is something we talk about in next week's episode. So teaser for that. But also, I do just want to say, it is not a conscious choice that we want to represent Michigan so much or Carnegie Mellon so much or some of the schools that we have, right? Or any of the truths. There's more schools than that we would say we have overrepresented to some extent on the pod. I do also think it is helpful information that without trying and just grabbing interesting and successful actors, which for the most part, ever since season one, I really tried to be a little conscious with scholastic diversity. And since then I've been like, let me just find interesting people who have interesting conversations. But it's worth noting that I have naturally overrepresented certain schools, right? I will say Broadway and the industry at large obviously does that. They obviously do overrepresent some schools at the highest level of profession, right? So there's a little teaser to next week's pod, and it's all of what next week's pod will be about. So I will say no more on that, but listen in around Christmas or afterward. We've talked before. I just want to hit on the nerves of it all. I love that story about what Britney talked about with her hands shaking and she felt like her body was betraying her. Really cool. We talked about it this weekend. It's the reason I wanted to jot it down here is we talked about it this weekend at the kickoff meeting, where a student basically asked the question of like, how do I not be nervous? I was asking our alumni students who had just gone through the process, how did you deal with nerves, right? And you will know if you're a regular listener that I'm a big fan of this idea of embracing your nerves, embracing your adrenaline, as opposed to expecting not to be nervous or trying to not be nervous, because you always will have some level of adrenaline, some level of what people call nerves. And it likely will surge when you have auditions that are really important. Again, we talked about that before, but when it's the big Broadway audition, it's a big TV audition, whatever the big thing is, like it's likely going to feel more important and you're likely going to have a surge of adrenaline, right? So basically the goal is to learn how to harness and use that excitement instead of letting it overwhelm you, as opposed to trying to like prevent it from coming up at all, right? And then, of course, you do have to be kind to yourself when occasionally it naturally will spill over sometimes. Sometimes you are going to be more nervous than you want to be, even when you're good at riding the wave of your adrenaline, even when you really know what you're doing. There are times, in the same way athletes have this, where there's a moment where the moment gets a little too big for them, and then they learn and they adjust, and the next time it's a little bit easier, right? So you can also be forgiving of yourself that you will get better even at that process of riding the wave of your adrenaline when it comes. It's something that Lisi talks about in her episode, and I wanted to mention Lisi. Lisi talks about the idea of how her vocal instrument, especially, feels different under different levels of adrenaline. I think she says, "I come in like a tuba and I end like a violin," or forever, whichever the order was, right? And I just wanted to make sure we did, because we mentioned Lisi in this episode. She did company the tour with Britney. And we have to give a huge shout out and congrats to her for having her baby earlier this month. We gave some congrats at the Private Edition weekend, but I'm giving it all to you as well. If you're listeners and fans of Lisi from that podcast episode, just so cool for me to have so many friends and colleagues who are like making it work in the industry and also supporting families. Boy, it's hard as an artist, but boy, it is cool when you do it. So yay, yay, yay. You don't hear me mention it in this interview only because we filmed this interview weeks before it actually ended up happening. We filmed in November, and then she had her baby at the top of December. But we couldn't be happier for you, Lisi. Okay, and the last point I want to talk about is very obviously that idea of bringing you to the table. So what we're talking about in all these runners. Brittany mentions the idea of bringing you to the table. I really like that. I mean, it can feel a little bit cliche. It's certainly something we've heard many times, but if you think of it as an active bit of advice, meaning it's something that you have to actively do to bring yourself to the table, to bring your point of view to the table. We've talked about this before. When schools say, "We want to see you," I think often they are commenting on the ways in which you hide from yourself by putting up masks. We've talked about that a lot before. And there are ways that you show them what you think they want to see, and it prevents us from seeing you. We've certainly talked about that, right? Whether that's in material selection or performance choices, so much you can do that sort of plays it safe. You hide behind the idea of a character instead of bringing all of yourself, right? I think all of that discussion we've had before, is something to be aware of. It's certainly going to be helpful for you to be aware of that. But also, and I think to Brittany's point, to think about the positive version of what it is to bring you to the table actively. I talk about this a bit in that blog. I wrote a blog on sharing, not hiding. I think it's helpful for all of you this time of year. But I'll just add in that idea. What sometimes is missing when we play it safe is your full passionate self. And I want to kind of define that a little bit more in terms of what I mean by your full passionate self. I'm using the word passionate for lack of a better word, but there is this thing that happens if you really step on the gas in an audition. You really actively try to bring all of yourself, which necessarily includes your baggage and includes the things about yourself that scare you a little bit, but that only then do they really get a sense of you. That basically something different happens when you put the pedal all the way to the metal and we see like all of you brought into the room. It's different than just the idea of, are you hiding or not hiding? You could be not hiding, but still not pressing the pedal all the way to the floor, right? I sometimes use that phrase. I love it, though some people laugh at it. This idea of like, leave the room stinking like you. I want to leave the room really smelling like Charlie, right? And to leave a bit of your own scent, there's like a different kind of presentness that is an active choice. It's like an aggressive active choice, right? And I'll say for me, and this won't be true for everyone because I think it works differently for different people in terms of how you do this process. But for me, I had to unlock and work through some fears of mine. I had to work through a fear of appearing arrogant. I had to work through this fear of like my own level of competitiveness. I'm afraid of some of my own levels of masculinity, my own sort of aggression, right? And there's this like Charlie energy that I can bring to the table. Podcast listeners probably won't be shocked to hear this. That can intimidate some people, and that I am a little bit afraid of, right? I have learned to be polite, and I've learned to be inoffensive in life just from like living in real society. And it is a very useful social skill that we all should have, the ability to not always be your full unbridled self in every social situation. But as an actor, I had to find a way to let that go, right? There's a reason that I do so well in Aaron Sorkin material, that I really connect to it, right? Not only do I enjoy that writing, but something unlocks for me in those characters because they're unafraid and unashamed of their intelligence and their arrogance, two things that I am really afraid of personally, right? And that doesn't mean that I only have to play characters with qualities I'm afraid of. Of course not. This same advice of putting that pedal to the metal, that allows me to play characters that are vulnerable and that are emotional and that are grounded and subtle. But there's this thing of like, I'm going to bring the full range of human expression. To do that, I have to bring all of Charlie to the table and then choose what I'm going to highlight or not highlight, right? but I can't be like hiding from it or be afraid of it, right? What I had to let go was the idea that like I wanted the people behind the table to like me. Of course, we always want everyone to like us, right? But that especially that I wanted them to like me in this specific way that I was hoping I would, right? Like you think about it, most of the time you walk into the room, most of the time I walk in a room, I want people to think I am funny and that I'm nice and that I'm humble and that I'm handsome and all these other things that most other people want people to think about them, right? But if I bring my full self to the room, including the fullness of all my human experiences and some of those things that scare me a little bit, the arrogance, the competitiveness, the aggression, right? Then these people can actually meet the real me and then they can like me or dislike me as they will, right? But they're meeting me and not my representative, right? And the truth is, many, I hope, and I think this is true, will still think I am humble and nice and all of those things. It will still happen. It doesn't mean I have to let go of the possibility of that result, but I have to let go of the forcing of that result. If I'm trying to show them only this part of me, then they're missing out on getting the fullness of me, including some of those specific parts, right? It's this idea of like when you're forcing them in that direction, you're actually going to not achieve that result. But if you can simply bring all of yourself to the table and then trust them to interpret you as they will, that's their job. But your job is to bring the fullness of yourself to the table. It's like a good human skill in general. I think it is helpful at times in life for everybody, but it's really an essential skill for an actor. All right, let's wrap there for another episode of Mapping the College Audition, produced by Megan Cordier and Kelly Prendergast, with social media work by Jordan Rice. Please like and subscribe, rate and review wherever you can. Follow us at Mapping the College Audition on Instagram. Head over to MTCA.com for information on how MTCA can help you with your individual college prep needs. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, please trust that you're enough for the right program exactly as you are right now. Now keep striving. We'll catch you next week.